Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 195. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about remote island tropical destinations as we go to Niue in the South Pacific.
Got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I do have some news stories for you. Probably the scariest piece of news is a British tourist was set on fire by a Greek woman on the island of Crete after he allegedly pulled down his trousers in front of her. Word to the wise here, don't sexually harass Greek women, and to be really safe, just don't sexually harass women. If you're having a similar clothing malfunction while on vacation, you might be interested to know that a company in Australia will actually rent you clothes. That is, you will pay them to use clothes for a period of time rather than renting your garments. The idea here is that your luggage is lighter and the clothes are waiting for you at the hotel as you arrive. A woman who was flying El Al Airlines from Paris to Tel Aviv wanted to travel with her boxer, who was too large, and so that boxer would have had to normally go in the cargo hold, so she paid for the entire business section of the plane for $32,000 so that she could fly with her dog. So when they say it's a dog's life, perhaps they mean first class. Russian soccer fans who are planning to travel to Wales for next month's World Cup qualifier have been told by the head of the country's supporter association that they can avoid swine flu by drinking whiskey. I don't think it'll work, but I'm not sure that anyone will complain. If you are a fan of travel news, I am now doing another podcast called This Week in Travel, which is a weekly podcast discussing travel news, both serious and not so serious. Check that out at thisweekintravel.com. For links to these stories, as well as other news items, check out the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Nick Irving, who's come to talk to us about Niue. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris.
And people are probably already trying to go back in their iPods or their computers to figure out what it is I just said, because not everyone, I'm guessing, has heard of this destination. I certainly hadn't. Where are we talking about?
Well, we're talking an island. It's about 2,200 kilometers northeast of New Zealand. A little closer, it would be south of Samoa, east of Tonga, and west of the Cook Islands, just south of the equator.
Okay. I'm guessing that you didn't accidentally stumble upon Niue. So why did you go?
Well, I lived in Australia about 6 years ago
Mm-hmm.
on a working holiday, and I heard about it in the news. And I'd never heard of it. I knew a lot about the South Pacific and some of the island nations and such out there. And I read up on it and found out that it is the smallest democracy in the world, or so they claim. I became fascinated with it. And then I heard about them on the news even more a few years later when they had a pretty devastating Category 5 cyclone go through and pretty much demolished the island, and there was a lot of questions about whether it would survive. And so I kept on looking at the country, and then when I moved to New Zealand this past year on a working holiday, I decided, what the heck, buy a ticket and go up there.
Now, I'm still wondering whether San Marino, well, the Republic of San Marino, may be the smallest democracy in the world, but
That's why I said, so they claim.
So they claim. So how do you get there, first of all? Because you're talking someplace that is an airplane ride from someplace. It has connections to New Zealand, I assume?
Yes, it has a connection once a week to New Zealand.
Okay.
And it's also across the international date line from New Zealand. So when I left on Sunday at 10 a.m., and it's about a 3.5, 4-hour flight to Niue, I arrived in Niue at 2:30 p.m. on Saturday. When I left Niue on the following Saturday at 3:30 p.m., I arrived in Auckland at 6:30 p.m. on Sunday. It makes it even more fun, I think.
So there's, I assume, ships that are bringing cargo in as well, and then this once-a-week flight that goes to New Zealand, and those are the only flights that go in?
Yeah.
They shut down the airport 6 days a week.
It's not shut down. It is a refueling station, I think. I think the French were flying a plane in there the week I was there, and everyone knew that the French flew in on Wednesday to refuel. I think it was like an army kind of thing. And I think there are some private flights that come in occasionally, but it's the one flight a week, and they have one ship a month, actually.
Wow.
And I was lucky because the ship came in a couple days before I arrived. According to the people at the grocery store on the island, they had run out of toilet paper the week before.
I'm guessing, unlike some other remote destinations, then, things can actually be a little more expensive in terms of cost of living once you get there, if things are being shipped in and only coming in once a month.
It depended on what it was. For example, the flights, of course, are a little more expensive than if you went to like Rarotonga or something, because there's only one a week. Some food items were more expensive. For example, a lot of the Australians and New Zealanders will like this. The Tim Tams were extremely expensive.
So the essentials.
Yeah. But a bottle of Coke was almost the same price as it was in New Zealand. There were some things that were more expensive, some things that were about the same. And accommodation is actually relatively inexpensive and quite nice as far as I could see. So that was good. My accommodation was only 45 New Zealand dollars a night, and I had my own room. I did have a shared bathroom, but there was only one other person in the hotel the week that I was there.
And I want to peg right now at least the New Zealand dollar and the U.S. dollar about 2 to 1.
It's about 1.6, 1.7 New Zealand dollars for every U.S. dollar.
Okay.
I think it was 167 today. So.
All right. And why would one go to Niue?
Because it's probably the most interesting South Pacific island. Unlike the other islands around, it's a coral atoll, and so you don't have the sandy beaches that you would expect to see, like in Rarotonga, where a lot of holidaymakers in the area kind of go. It's got some absolutely stunning natural beauty. There's crazy coral formations all over the place. You can be hiking down a trail, and there's this massive piece of coral, and then around it are these roots of a tree, and the tree's growing on top of the coral. I mean, it's fantastic. The water is stunningly gorgeous because I think the coral helps to keep it filtered, And so it's amazing. And the diving is absolutely exceptional. I wasn't able to dive on this trip, but I talked to several people that were there just for the diving, and they could see 70 to 80 meters,
Oh my, wow.
which is absolutely incredible. The other reason to go to Niue is there really aren't any predators. So if you don't like creepy crawlies, there really aren't a lot there.
So this is not a shark diving location, you're saying?
No, but it is a whale watching area as well.
Oh, okay.
I believe this is the time of year right now when the whales go past. And I think the flight actually fills up pretty good this time of year because of that. More people come to the island.
What was the biggest surprise?
The biggest surprise were some of the kind of contradictions on the island. For example, there's no law about wearing a seatbelt, but there is a law about wearing a helmet when you're on a bike or motorbike.
Okay.
Not only that, but like the hospitality of the Polynesian people there, every single person waves at you when you go past. Mainly that's because the maximum speed is 60 kilometers per hour. Anywhere in the island, that's the maximum speed. And so everyone waves at you. Another good example about what surprised me is I went on my very last night there to go have fish and chips at this small restaurant. And what was really cool about it was the woman that served us was the acting prime minister, because the prime minister was off doing international business in New Zealand. She was the one making and serving our food, but she was also the prime minister. That was really fascinating to me.
So we're not talking about a populous island nor a large island.
I believe there are around 1,500 people on the island, and the road that goes around is 76 miles.
Okay.
So it goes all the way around the island. A maximum of 1,500 people. Some people say it's 1,600. Some people say it's 1,000. So you never really know. But I think consensus is around 1,500.
Okay.
And all Niueans are dual citizens with New Zealand. And so there are about 20,000 Niueans in New Zealand as well.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And they are really well traveled. For example, in Auckland, you'll see people with Niuean t-shirts that say Niuean, so you know they're Niuean. And I was on a flight from Sydney to Bangkok and ran into a woman that's an Olympic weightlifter from Niue. It was interesting because they're well traveled. They travel all the time. One woman on the plane that was sitting next to me had a small baby, and she lived on the island. And she had been back to New Zealand 3 times since the baby was born 5 months ago.
You talked about the size of the island. How do you get around?
That's interesting. There's a couple of car rental companies that will rent you cars. They do drive on the left-hand side of the road, and it's an extremely easy process to rent something. And usually at the car rental companies, you can also rent motorcycles and bikes. And I decided, with the assistance of someone I met on the plane, a Canadian traveler, that we were going to rent bikes and hang out all week because we were about the same age. We were both independent travelers, and we were going to ride motorcycles around the island, and that's how we're going to get around. And it was a really good decision. So we had to go get our motorcycle license, which cost about $11. And it was great to have the motorcycle and go around. There's no public transport, obviously. You could probably easily get a ride around. They're very laid back, and they're interested in the people that visit the island, so it'd probably be pretty easy to hitch a ride as well.
Yeah, I suppose with that many people, there really isn't going to be an extensive bus system.
None at all.
And so if you went to the island, there's multiple towns on the island. Did you stay in one town, or did you explore the whole island? Did you home base from one place? Are there different regions that you definitely should see?
I based myself at the same guest house the entire week.
Okay.
It's very simple to get across the island. It's a short motorcycle ride. There would be no use to really stay at 2 different spots because it's so easy to get around. And also, the getting around is really inexpensive. I got around on motorcycle, and it cost 30 New Zealand dollars a day to rent the motorcycle, which I thought was incredibly inexpensive.
Okay.
I think that a couple of great places to stop and see on the island that are relatively easy to get to are the Togo Chasm and the Limu Pools. The Limu Pools were stunning. They're kind of where freshwater and saltwater kind of mix, and it's absolutely beautiful, the water that's there. And a lot of the pictures you see of Niue are from the Limu Pools. The Togo Chasm has these crazy coral formations that are pointy and tall and seem like they go forever. And there's also a small oasis where there's palm trees and sand and everything. And I actually saw a few snakes down there. Got some funny pictures of some snakes crawling through the water. That was really impressive. Also, there's a really nice resort that's on the southwestern side of the island. That there's some really great, I call them nooks and crannies, that you can see beautiful fish, see beautiful water, see the beautiful coral. It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. It's like nothing I've ever seen before.
And you say you didn't have a chance to scuba dive, so what did you do during your week there?
I did a lot of hiking. I really enjoy hiking, and Josh, the guy that was with me, also is a big hiker. And we would motorcycle, or we'd take the motorbikes to a spot and then go hiking. There are trails everywhere. They do a really good job of posting general areas, and there'll be trails and what have you. Hung out on this pseudo beach for a while. The Limu pools are fantastic to hang out in.
And we say pseudo beach because we're not talking white sand beaches, we're talking coral. So you keep the sandals on, or...
Yeah, you do. And there are some spots where there's a small area of sand. It's not expansive or anything. But yeah, you have to bring really good shoes. I actually ruined a pair of shoes there because Josh and I actually were kind of adventurous. And so we went to this place called the Vicona Chasm, which wasn't listed on all of the maps. We found it on one of our maps, but it wasn't on a couple of the others. And it was a walk that actually ended up being about 4 hours long that someone hasn't been through in a while. It wasn't marked a lot. We only got lost a few times, maybe for about 20 minutes total. But this chasm was incredible. And the sea that day was very wild. There was a storm coming in, and so it made it all the better, I guess. And so that was really stunning, actually. It's not on a lot of maps. I don't even think it's on the main map that's on their website. It was actually kind of cool because it was so tough to get to. It was really incredible because you felt like you were kind of in a sci-fi movie or like a horror movie because there's these huge pieces of dried up coral that's become rock in the middle of nowhere. And then there are these trees that actually look like they grow downwards. The branches grow downwards. I'm fairly well traveled. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. It's really hard to explain, but it's absolutely gorgeous.
But you have a picture that you've just sent me that people have been looking at while you've been describing this, right?
Yes, I have 200 photos on Flickr as well, Chris.
Okay.
From this trip alone, which is a lot for me. Yeah.
And so we'll encourage people to be taking a look at the iTunes Enhanced version that will have some of Nick's photos in here. What part of being there, and we're talking about a place that's fairly isolated, was just surprisingly familiar, and what part was surprisingly foreign?
The part that was surprisingly familiar is that I could get the beer that I really like from New Zealand.
Okay.
You could get New Zealand beer at very select places because it's a very Christian country, and so a few restaurants actually have beer, and there's nothing better than when you're on a tropical island having a beer in the afternoon. Also, a lot of the food was similar. A lot of the people that have places in Niue have been to school in New Zealand, and so there's some of the same kinds of food were in both places.
Okay. And I think of New Zealand food as being very similar to British food.
A little bit more fresh, probably.
A little more fresh, okay.
Don't tell the Brits that.
This is just between you and I. Don't worry about it.
Good. It's a little bit more fresh. For example, one of their big things is a panini that has either turkey or chicken cranberry sauce and like a brie cheese. It actually tastes really good, even though it sounds disgusting. And I had one of those there. The other thing that was really familiar was the fact that they actually have an Indian restaurant on the island that Josh and I went to every day for lunch because it was really good. The thing that was kind of foreign, everyone there knows both Niuean and English, but what was foreign was going to church, which almost seemed compulsory, going to church on Sunday, and the whole service was in Niuean. It was interesting, but really kind of difficult to connect with. And so that was foreign as well.
And Niuean is a type of Polynesian?
Yeah. It seemed quite Polynesian, but like I said, literally everyone knows. I think there was one guy we encountered that didn't know English. We actually called him Moses because he was just an older guy walking down the road with this 15-foot tall stick. You try to talk to him and he didn't know any English.
Okay.
And also, something kind of foreign that's kind of interesting is just how laid back it is. I mean, New Zealand's pretty laid back, but Niue is even more laid back about their lifestyle and everything. And that's, even though that shouldn't be something foreign, it is.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned where you were staying, but you didn't say the name of it.
Oh, I was staying at Kaloli's guest house.
Okay.
And they have all types of rooms, from the basic rooms, which is what I was in, to much larger, more luxurious rooms.
Okay. And so it sounds like there's really everything from economy to a resort on the island.
Yeah, they have a place called, I think it's called Matavi Resort. That's a bit more expensive. Some people I talked to said that they were paying around 200 New Zealand a night to stay there.
Okay. Well,
But it had like a pool and everything. I was staying at Kololi's guest house, which was good because it was centrally located in Alofi, which is the main commercial center that had the grocery store and most of the restaurants and such around the country.
Sorry, when you say the grocery store, it makes me laugh a little.
They have a grocery store and a main convenience store. It's owned by the same family.
Okay.
There's a couple other places. There's a lot of places that sell, like, you can go get a drink or
Sure.
you can go buy some bread or an ice cream or what have you. So, but yeah, there is one grocery store on the island. It's called Swanson's.
Okay.
Which is funny because everything's closed on Sunday as well, which is really interesting. You didn't go to the grocery store when you were supposed to. But it was great being in Alofi because, like I said, it was close to the airport. It was a pretty nice, clean town, and the people were great, and it was a great place to kind of center myself.
What do you wish you had known before you'd gone there?
I wish I would have known how good of a time I was going to have. I should have read more about the history of the country, because it's kind of interesting. I've read a couple of books that have mentioned Niue. I think they called it, well, Captain Cook kind of was the first white settler to the island, and I think he called it Savage Island because they painted their faces red or something, and were trying to scare off the people that were coming to their country. They do have an interesting history because Christian missionaries have come to the island and spread Christianity, which has happened in a lot of the Pacific Islands as well.
Any warnings you would give? We talked about good shoes.
Yes. Oh, I do have a couple of warnings, which is surprising. You should really have a reasonable level of fitness when you come to Niue, just because a lot of places aren't accessible unless you have good balance and you have a good pair of shoes and such, because there aren't the railings and the ropes and the things that you're accustomed to when you go to more populated places.
Okay.
If you're someone that can only travel if they have 100 things to do in a day, it might be difficult to be there for a week.
Okay.
There are a couple of afternoons where I would sit on the porch and read a book or kind of hang out or what have you, because literally I probably saw every part of the country.
Okay.
I'm not really joking. Not really joking about that at all. Saw most of the country, a couple places 2 or 3 times. So if you're someone who has to have an itinerary and you have to visit 100 places in a week, it might not be the best place for someone. But someone who wants a little adventure, some relaxation, interesting people and interesting culture, it's definitely the place for you. It's funny because I don't know if you've seen the map of Niue yet.
Yeah. No, I had.
They have all these places listed.
Yeah.
Like Tumamufa, there's nothing there. Maybe someone lived there in the past, sort of thing. One of the funniest things I saw there was the fact that there were chickens on the golf course. There were chickens everywhere.
And what was their handicap?
I don't know, but they were the only ones on the golf course. And I think the golf course is only open one day because we were going to go play, and there was no one there. And so we weren't able to play. I can't explain what it's like in a country where there's no one. There are no crowds everywhere. When Josh and I were traveling around, I think on our first 3 days, we saw 3 other people when we were not in Alofi. And those 3 people, actually 4 people, were a husband, his wife, and their 2 kids swimming in the Limu pools. And they were actually teachers at the school. They're from New Zealand. They were teaching in the school. And it's just fascinating that you can go to all these absolutely beautiful places and not see anyone.
Hmm.
It's indescribable.
Interesting.
Niue's motto is undiscovered, unspoiled, unbelievable,
Hmm.
which I think is funny, but...
And the most memorable person you met?
There's two. The first one is Josh. We became pretty fast friends when we were traveling, and he was the other guy there. But the Niue that I remember the most is the woman that is in charge of immigration. She was a really nice woman. And I actually saw her 3 days later at a mall in Auckland. And I couldn't believe it. There she was, the woman that did the immigration stamps as you're leaving. And you get on the plane, and then she gets on the plane and flies to Auckland on the same flight as you. And it was just funny because to see another Niue and so quickly after just being a Niue. And it was funny because I was actually out buying replacement shoes when I saw her.
And as we go to wrap this up, you really know you're in Niue when what?
When every person that you see in a car that passes you waves.
And this is somebody coming from the Midwest. We didn't say that you're from Iowa. I thought people were friendly there.
We are, and you do see that in small towns in Iowa, but I can probably count on one or two hands how many times people didn't wave. You might see it once or twice a day in Iowa, but you'll see it every day in Niue.
Okay. And then if you had to describe Niue in 3 words, what 3 words?
Magical, stunning, and relaxing.
Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking about Niue. And if people wanted to read more about your travels, where should they go?
You should go to my website, which is nicholasirving.com.
Great. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. Nick, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Chris.
I have an internet resource for you today that Judy gave me. Judy and I are talking about her possibly volunteering at the Amateur Traveler. And the internet resource is Help Exchange. That's HELPX.net. And Help Exchange is an online listing of host organic farms, non-organic farms, farm stays, homestays, ranches, backpackers, B&B hostels, and such where you can work part-time while you're traveling overseas. So this might have been a good resource to go with last week's show, but I didn't have it last week. So check that out, helpexchange.net or HELPX.net. I had a comment on the episode on Beijing recently that came from Pac Tam from Montreal, who had 2 clarifications. One, Beijing is translated from the local dialect of the capital, which automatically became the official language after the fall of the empire. Peking is the Cantonese pronunciation of the same 2 words, meaning northern capital. And 2, the Temple of Heaven should more appropriately be translated into the Altar of the Sky. The building functioned as the private chapel for the emperor, who was actually called Son of the Sky. There he would have received communion from and practice ritualized offerings to the sky god, a rather faceless and distant deity, but chief among the Chinese pantheon. Thanks so much for that clarification. And then I got a very heartwarming comment from Dean from Oregon, who said, "Hello, Chris. I'm a regular listener, and I wanted to pass along a comment with perhaps a slightly different perspective on the value of your efforts. My 20-year-old daughter just headed out to Thailand last week on a 4-week volunteer project and adventure tour. We have traveled quite a bit together, but this is her first international adventure on her own. After she left, I went back to your archives to find a show on Thailand, and I was pleased to come across your show number 129. I enjoyed the guests' comments about Chiang Mai, Bangkok, the cooking class, and especially the Elephant Nature Park near Chiang Mai, as this is where my daughter is spending part of her volunteer time working hands-on with the elephants. While I miss my daughter quite a bit, hearing your show helped me to understand better her adventures halfway around the world and brought just a little comfort to a dad whose little girl is a long way from home. As a side note, before she left, my daughter set up your show theme as ringtones on our cell phones when we call each other. Thanks for your diligence in putting together a quality show." Thanks so much, Dean. That was one of the most heartwarming comments I think that I have ever gotten. And I can completely relate to Dean because my little girl leaves for Switzerland for a semester abroad in 2 weeks. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode of The Amateur Traveler. Remember to check out This Week in Travel at thisweekintravel.com. Also, hopefully it will show up in iTunes soon. It wasn't there last time I checked. If you have a comment for me, a show suggestion, a clarification, feel free to drop me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, share it with the whole community by leaving a comment at amateurtraveler.com. I'm also trying to stir up a little more activity on the discussion boards, amateurtraveler.com/board. You can also follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/Chris2X, and as always, thanks so much for listening.